All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Samantha Parsons, and I'm the campaigns director with Uncook My Campus. Just to do some quick housekeeping items before we get started, everyone is currently on mute. You're automatically muted when you join the call. We are going to go through an op-ed presentation as well as a press release presentation, so giving you two opportunities to work with the media. And so we're going to save questions until we get through both of those presentations. However, if you have a question during the presentation, you can use a chat feature. If you're joining us by video, there is a chat feature where you can type out a question that you have. You just kind of hover at the bottom of your Zoom screen. You'll see chat. It's the second feature to the right. And you can type in your question there. You're also welcome to chat in any comments or feedback that you have for the presenters, but at the end of the presentation, we'll also put in the chat box an actual feedback form that we would love for everyone to fill out. We'll also be sending, this webinar is being recorded, and so the content of the webinar will eventually be on our website, and we will send a follow-up email to everyone who registered with a link to that video, as well as another link to the feedback survey, because your feedback does mean a lot to us. We're going to be doing a lot of these skills trainings and political education webinars over the next few months. And so everyone who fills out a feedback form can just ensure that we can make all of the future ones even better. So yeah, I appreciate everyone for being here, and I will kick it over to Avi to introduce herself and get us started.
Thanks, Sam. Hi, I'm Avital Norman Nathman. I'm the media coordinator here at Uncook My Campus. What that means is that on an almost daily basis, I'm writing press releases, I'm helping craft op-eds from our organization, and just trying to get our message out, trying to get out the information about what we're doing and also what our grassroots campaigns are doing on the ground. That's all of you. So what we want to start encouraging is for folks on various campuses and communities across the country to do these things for themselves. One, it adds a more vibrant narrative to what we're doing. It adds more voices, and it adds that first-person perspective that can really speak to what is happening. You know, we've got a great higher level vision and understanding of what's happening, but y'all are the experts where you live. And so sometimes it really is helpful, instead of us coming in to a local or state paper and writing an op-ed, to have your voices there. And same for press releases. So hopefully with the skills that we share with you today, you'll be able to take that back to your teams and, you know, get your stories out there. So we're going to start first with an op-ed tutorial, and then after that, we'll follow it up with a press release tutorial. Both of these slideshow presentations will be available as well you can get them online. We'll let you know how to access those after, as well as the video recording of this webinar. So we're going to start today with the op-ed tutorial, and before we kind of dig into all of the basics of it, Sam's going to go over, hold on, a little bit more about Uncook My Campus.
Thanks. Yeah, I wanted to just give folks a bit of a context for what Uncook My Campus does before we get started. We're going to make this a norm in the top of all of our skills trainings, just to talk a little bit about why we do the work that we do. So at Uncook My Campus, our mission is to ignite and preserve the power of the people by protecting public institutions from actors whose expressed intent is to place corporate interest over the common good. What this means is that there are a lot of public institutions in our communities. K through 12 education, higher education, our courts, our legislatures. These are all goods that are owned by the people for the people, but there are corporate interests that are very much trying to take advantage of those goods and harm our communities through taking advantage of those goods. And so it's our mission to equip people with the ability to push back on that co-optation by these corporate interests and ensure that our public institutions are actually working for the common good. We do that in several different ways. Our theory of change is rooted in research, building grassroots power, narrative agitation, and facilitating access to ideal solutions. What that means is that we conduct investigations to research more about what the relationships between wealthy donors, corporations, and our public institutions look like. We then take that research and we leverage it to build local and national power. So where we can show that corporate interests are violating our consent by taking advantage of our public goods, we build local and national power to push back on that and ensure that our common goods are actually working for the people. We do that by equipping activists at the campus, local, state, and national level with political education, skills trainings, and strategic support to run campaigns largely centered around the Koch network, but ideally centered around any confrontation you're having with corporate interests who are co-opting these public goods. We then create accountability through conversation. I like to call this narrative agitation. So that's what we're going to be talking a lot about today, is how can we not only get the investigations that we do into the media so that the public knows what's going on, but how can we also cover your stories and our stories of building that grassroots power and really highlight the ways in which communities are pushing back on these corporate interests. And then finally, we facilitate access to solutions. At the national level, we really focus on working with the grassroots level because oftentimes folks at the grassroots level have the solution. And sometimes people are doing really great work in one area of the country, and other people in another area of the country could really benefit from knowing about that incredible work that you're doing, the solutions that you're developing, whether that's on campus or in your community. And so we help amplify those solutions that you're coming up with, or for some reason, if you don't have a solution to a problem you're confronting, we help you identify a solution, build a solution. And we want to make sure that people across the country, across the globe, have access to those solutions, because odds are there are communities that are facing very similar challenges that you're facing. We also use a distributive model of organizing, so we do a lot of partnerships. We honor the fact that there are student, community, and state-based groups doing really valuable work already. Much of that work is already actually working to uncook their community. And so we just seek to partner with those organizations to deepen the work of those folks, to ensure that they're equipping an analysis against the Koch network and against corporate influence into that really important community work that they're doing. And then last but certainly not least, we as a national organization have a commitment to anti-oppression, which means we are committed to the principles and practices of anti-oppression, and we do this by creating an internal ecosystem that honors the dignity of each of our team members and the dignity of our partners and our grassroots advocates, while really focusing on centering the leadership of disenfranchised and oppressed leaders and groups. And so our commitment to anti-oppression really flows through all of that theory of change and our model of organizing as well. And I will pass it back to you, Avi.
Thanks, Sam. So we're going to just jump right into talking about op-eds. And the first thing, when to write an op-ed, right? A lot of people come to us and ask, when should we be writing an op-ed? Should it be when everything, like when the moment something happens, after it happens, before it happens, for every single thing that we do on campus? So here's just a few guidelines that we suggest about when it's appropriate to write an op-ed. First, when something significant happens, right? So let's say you have a big win at your university, but it doesn't always have to necessarily be a win. Sometimes we're fighting your university, your administration accepting dark money. So that's definitely not a win, but you can use that to your advantage, to talk about it, to write about it, to express your feelings and how the Uncook messaging kind of works with that. So don't necessarily think it's only for the positives. It can be for a variety. You know, maybe a new center is popping up on campus and you want to talk about why that would be awful for your community. Also, when your voice can add something unique to the story, a lot of times you're going to see the same story being written over and over again. And so an op-ed is your opportunity to share your unique perspective. It's really about your voice and harnessing your story, like I mentioned before. And I'll probably repeat that over and over again. But that really is the crux of it, is why, you are the expert here and you should be the one telling the story. So like I mentioned before, even a loss can be newsworthy if you spin it right. Talk about the topical event and then go into detail about why you must keep fighting, right? So you're going to discuss what happened, but more importantly, how you're going to combat it, what you're going to be doing on campus and why. Sometimes you can write an op-ed in response to an article or another op-ed. Not as much on the second end, but definitely if you read an article in your local or state paper or online, and it mentions Koch funding, and you say, I would love to talk about how that impacted environmental curriculum on campus. Maybe it changed how something was taught or not taught. And so that could be a really great opportunity to insert your opinion. And it's also a great way to get an in at a paper if you're responding to something they've already presented, because then it kind of keeps that article in the public view. And so they appreciate that. And a lot of the times newspapers appreciate that conversation. So that could be a good in as well. Same with current events, right? So keep tabs on current events and the news. If something happens that you can tie your campaign or story to, jump at the chance. And now, especially with an election year, there's a lot of things happening that you can tie back to campus, whether it's the way Trump takes money away from some environmental concerns, or climate change aspects, or the way he pushed charter schools in the State of the Union a couple weeks ago. There's always a way to find a different angle for your story. And that's, you want to keep it fresh. And then lastly, timeliness counts. So if something happens in the news that relates to you or your university, don't wait longer than 24 hours before pitching an op-ed. For a few reasons. One, somebody else could have jumped at the chance and they'll get there before you do. And two, newspapers really do rely on timeliness. So unless you're writing about what's called an evergreen issue, which means something that's always going to be apropos to talk about, regardless of current events, you're really going to want to jump in it as fast as you can.
And just to follow up with some examples real quick of when to write an op-ed. So if you've been following our work, you know that we focus a bit on campus free speech. Campus free speech bills are popping up across the country that penalize students for protesting white supremacists on campus. And there have been great news coverage of these bills being proposed in state legislatures, but that news coverage really oftentimes only talks about what the bill says, maybe who proposed it. The reality is that the Koch network is behind those bills that are popping up across the country. And so a way that you could intersect or engage in that conversation is you could respond to an article talking about a campus free speech bill in your state, but unpack the fact that these bills are being modeled off of model legislation that the Koch network funded, and oftentimes legislators affiliated with the American Legislative Exchange Council, which is also Koch funded, are the ones who are proposing these bills. So you can give that extra depth to the story while also educating the public on the issue. Another example, more campus focused, is let's say your university just got a new president. They just hired a new university president. The university publishes a blog or an article about the new president being hired. You could respond to that and say, we're super excited to welcome this new president to campus. And then talk about your campaign. Say that you can't wait to see what President X chooses to do on the corruption on our campus related to funding from the Charles Koch Foundation. Really, anything that happens on your campus, if you're paying attention, can be spun to allow you to talk about your issue and insert your narrative into the conversation. One more thing that I'll say, if you're part of our campus network, writing op-eds about something that's happening on another campus with a Koch-funded center could also be an opportunity for you to bolster your own narrative. So if you have Koch funding on your campus and you're in Kansas, but students in Virginia just did a big action against their Koch-funded center, you could write an op-ed talking about the work that folks in Virginia just did and situate it on the fact that you want to build that momentum in Kansas as well.
Those are some great examples, Sam. Thank you. So in addition to when to write an op-ed, what we'll talk about now are the basics how to write an op-ed. So the most important part of your op-ed is the intro, because that's going to be what pulls your reader in. It's going to be what pulls the editor in to make the decision whether or not to publish your op-ed. So you want to have a really strong intro. And part of that intro, or what you can also call is the nut graph, that really important paragraph, is you need to figure out your main point argument and make it in the first paragraph, right? Those of you who have been through expository writing, I'm sure you've heard it called your thesis sentence. And that's what it is in an op-ed as well, just that main point. So your opening paragraph should be strong, succinct, and you really need that attention-grabbing first line, because here's the reality, is that editors are going to be reading, depending on the outlet, 10 to 100 submissions on a daily or weekly basis. And if you have a really strong first line that grabs them in, they're going to want to read the rest of your piece. Otherwise, if it's just kind of flaky, boring, dull, they're just going to pass. Even if the rest of your piece is really stunning, they won't know that because they haven't been enticed to read the rest. Also important, stick to one argument, or a main point. You might have so many things that you want to say, or a lot of different points you want to make. An op-ed isn't the space to do that, because you don't have many words to work with in an op-ed. So you really want to find that main point, and then the rest of your op-ed is going to be supporting that point. If you have more than one main point, then it's going to weaken your argument and it's going to feel all over the place. So it'll be too confusing. And your main message should be easily explainable in 1 to 2 sentences. So a great way to kind of figure it out is, if you were going to tell somebody what you wanted to write about and you only had a couple of sentences, what would you say? And that will help you firm up that main point, the main argument for your intro. All right, the body. So this is what's going to back up that intro paragraph. So the intro paragraph did 2 things, right? It explained your main argument or your main point, and it also enticed the reader to keep going, to find out more. So either your body of your op-ed should include 2 or 3 examples that are going to back up or illustrate your main point. They could be examples from on campus. They could be, as Sam was saying, maybe you're talking about what happened on another campus, and so now you're going to bring in those examples and discuss why that would work well on your campus, or why your campus or the organizers in your area should be doing something similar to achieve something similar. And here's where you want to get your readers to care and explain to them why they should care. This is where that personal connection is really going to sell your story, really going to sell that op-ed. It says, remember, you're writing this because you are the expert in this case. So use that voice proudly. Bring in those people read because they make connections to what they're reading, right? So they see themselves in what they're reading, or they can at least relate to it when they hear someone's personal story. If they're just reading dry facts, they might be getting something significant information-wise, but they aren't necessarily relating to it. And you get more of an emotional response, more of a passionate response if you include those personal facts. Keep your paragraph short, providing supporting statements and some evidence in each one. And remember, again, you only have a few words, 600 to 800 words, maybe 1,000 max in some outlets to work with. So you're not really working with too many. Sam, did you want to include something here?
Yeah, I really think the body of an op-ed is really critical. And I want to just reemphasize a point that you just made, Avi, earlier today, is that your lived experience is expertise. So I've seen op-eds that have been riddled with data and statistics, and sometimes op-eds need a few sentences of like hard evidence and proof to back up what you're saying, but it absolutely should not be the main portion of your op-ed. Instead, I really want folks to feel good about honoring themselves as having expertise in their lived experiences, and honoring the fact that your values and the way your values inform how you experience something is really valuable. And odds are there are hundreds of other people, hundreds of thousands of other people out there that share your values and perhaps had similar lived experiences. And people are going to connect much more to you talking about that than data. So, for example, a lot of the work that we do is taking these big ideas and these large networks of donor influence and boiling them down into the direct harms that that donor influence is causing. So let's say your school accepts Koch funding, and you know that the Koch network uses colleges and universities to produce research and spread ideas that endorse their policy agenda. And you also know that the Koch networks is actually notorious for advocating for laws that have created the prison industrial complex. So that's part of their policy agenda. And you or someone in your family has been imprisoned and harmed by the prison industrial complex. If you feel comfortable, that is a relevant story. That's a powerful story of the ways in which your university is a part of an overarching network that is actually driving this harm around our communities, and you have actually experienced that direct harm. Those experiences matter, your voice matters, and I guarantee your voice matters a lot more than data and evidence. We have data, we have proof that the Koch network is doing this. What people need to know is how it's affecting them, and people who are in our network have those stories to tell.
Right. And I mean, I think something important to remember is the op in op-ed stands for opinion, right? So you're coming at this with I think, I feel. Those are A-OK phrases to use in an op-ed 100%. I know that kind of goes antithetical to a lot of writing you might see in a paper, but this is where you want to include those feelings and those experiences. And so then just to sum up now, the conclusion. So what you're doing there is basically what you would do in a conclusion for any piece of writing. You're summarizing your argument, you're circling back to that main point you had from your introduction. And it's very similar in the sense that, like your intro, you're keeping it short, succinct, solid. You're not introducing any new information or any new points here that can detract.
Sorry, I was going to say something there too. In any conclusion that you write, if you're running a campaign, please do not forget a call to action. So if you are running a campaign because you have a Koch Center on your campus and you write an op-ed talking about the harms associated with having a Koch Center on a campus, and you have a campaign calling for the university to remove that center from your university, make sure in your conclusion you mention that. Wrap up your opinion statement with that call to action, calling on your school or your college or university to remove your Koch Center from campus.
So just a couple of general writing tips, because like I mentioned, op-eds are definitely different than an article or an essay. And maybe you haven't written something in this vein. So here's just a couple of top tips from my end as someone who has written a bunch of op-eds. Avoid too much jargon or academic language. I think sometimes we forget when we are enmeshed in this world, especially in academia, but the people that are going to be reading these op-eds are everyday folks that might not know certain buzzwords or language that might be familiar to you. If you have to use a certain phrase, define it. But you really want to make your op-ed as accessible to as many people as possible. Use the active voice. One, just because grammatically and syntax-wise, the active voice is easier to read over passive voice, but it also makes you sound like that expert, and it makes your argument sound stronger. So here's an example. Don't write, it's hope that the GMU administration will ... Instead, I hope that George Mason University administration will disaffiliate with Koch funding, something like that. And again, that's where your I hope, I feel, those I statements, because again, it's your opinion. And then this is just one of, I know this is probably overwrought, but it is one of my favorite writing tips: show, don't tell. Colorful details describe the situation are better than dry facts. And that's what, what Sam was saying. Sometimes you need those facts, but if you're going to include that data, that detail, you want to do it in a way that they're engaging. So, the fact is that judges that attend Koch-funded seminars are harsher on people of color than white folks in their court. That's the fact. But if we can find a way to share that, that will get people more engaged in the topic. Like, we found that after one weekend of attending Koch-funded seminars, judges increase the sentencing lengths for Black and brown folks that sit before them when they're presiding, and they're more in favor of deregulating environmental protection. Both give you the same information, but one does it in a way with more details. You can kind of picture it in your mind, and it makes it more engaging for both the editor to accept the op-ed and for the readers who are going to be reading it. So we've kind of talked about this throughout, but I really want to hit this home, that an op-ed is a story of self. The personal is political. And one way to draw readers, and those assigning editors I mentioned, is to use your own story. So find out what makes your story stick out differently than someone on another campus, or a professor who's written about this before, or someone in business who's maybe written about dark money on campus. Find out, did it affect a course you took, or did you think your professor was saying something in a way because they were told to? Were you hoping to sign up for a class and next semester it was all of a sudden gone because of some influence from one of your campus centers that's Koch funded? So, use that data, use the details, but then include the experience that really engages and drives it home. And remember, when it comes to telling your story, you are the expert. I don't know if Sam and I can drive that point home any clearer. And also, when you come from a place of feeling like you're the expert, your words are going to just show that as well, and they'll be stronger. All right, Sam, do you want to take this and look at the Uncook connection?
Sure. So we've talked a little bit about this, but while the personal is very powerful, it's also important to contextualize the work that you're doing within the national context. Why I love working for Uncook, and to give a little brief background, I started a campaign against Koch funding at my alma mater, George Mason University, back in 2014. And back then, myself at GMU and other students at George Mason were working with students at Florida State University and the University of Kansas, but that was it. And I am so grateful that this network has expanded, and we're working with over 35 campuses, and faculty on over 200 campuses have been using our resources. Like, this network is a real network now, and it's beautiful to say that. I know when I was a student and I felt very alone in the work that I was doing at Mason, and so I love being able to equip students now with advice to contextualize the work that they're doing, in the fact that they have a whole crew of students and faculty across the country working on this issue as well. And so contextualizing your op-ed by mentioning the national movement that's growing against Koch funding on campus not only gives you more institutional power and movement power behind you, but it also helps promote the brand of Uncook My Campus and helps us get our name out there more, so that if a campus reads your op-ed, like let's say you share it on your Facebook and a friend of yours from high school who now goes to a school in a whole other state reads it, and they want to know if their campus is Coke funded, they can Google Uncook My Campus, go to our website, see the database that we have, find out if their campus is Coke funded or not, and then reach out to us to be a part of this national network themselves. And so making that Uncook connection to the larger national movement is really critical, not only for the growth of the movement, but also in terms of leveraging the power that you have by being a part of the movement.
All right, a couple of kind of housekeeping rules to keep in mind is that most news outlets, like I mentioned before, have a word limit for their op-ed section, usually between 600 to 800 words. But one of the great things is a lot of places will very specifically tell you exactly what they're looking for. So you can look up on the website under the opinion section. They'll tell you how to submit, what they're looking for. Some of them want you to send it within the text of the email. They'll tell you how many words and what to include. So not too many people make it difficult for you to submit an op-ed. Don't submit to more than one outlet at a time. The reason for this is that because once you've submitted to an outlet, they want the exclusive on it. They're not going to want to share it with someone else. And it's kind of in bad form to bomb like 40, different outlets and hope one of them gets back to you. This is one of the downfalls or pitfalls rather with op-eds, that you can't simultaneously submit. You have to wait and hear back. But what you can do is if your op-ed is time sensitive, you can mark that in your submission subject line, write timely, and then whatever the title of your op-ed is going to be. And then in the email itself, you can even say, if I don't hear back within X business days, I'll assume this isn't wanted. But a lot of outlets will also say that on their website. If you don't hear back from us within X business days, then we have passed. They just don't have the capacity to get back to every person individually. So where should you submit? Both local and national outlets have merit. What I would definitely suggest is before you submit is to do a quick overview of the outlet to make sure they haven't already published something similar. You could do a quick keyword search and look to see, because you don't want to waste your time submitting to an outlet only for them to tell you that they published something like that just last week, right? That takes up your time, their time, and you can be submitting elsewhere. The OpEd project, which is just an amazing resource in general, has a directory of both national and larger outlets. So you can see, like here, the Arizona Daily Star, it tells you 600 words max. You have to disclose your relationship with the issue and expertise. And you can also do letters to the editors as well. So, and they tell you exactly where to do it. All right, a little bit different. Arizona Republic doesn't want more than 550 words. They tell you what you should have in the subject line. They tell you what it should be relevant, provocative, constructive, and timely. And it goes through, has both local and, like I said, national outlets as well. Christian Science Monitor, Chronicle of Higher Ed, Chronicle of Philanthropy, a lot of Education Week. So you're able to find local or national outlets. Oh, and just to go back, if there's an outlet that you're unsure of any contact information and you just simply can't find it, feel free to get in touch with me, and I have resources where we can look up through a subscription service of contact information. So here's some examples of some solid op-eds, but for the moment, I'm going to skip this only because of time, since we still want to get to our press release tutorial as well. But as I mentioned, this slideshow will be available, so you can click on the different links. Some of these op-eds are ones, they all have to do with similar topics. Some of them are ones we worked on from Uncook My Campus, like this one that came out within a day after David Koch died, and we talked about the impact of that and how we still need to continue to fight. And the other ones are from other writers, but on, like I mentioned, a similar topic. But these are all really strong examples that can give you a great sense if you just are struggling and have no idea how to go about it.